Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Urban League's Urban League Job Network's Digital Career Success Series. We are kicking off the 2018 session and series with no other than Torrin Ellis. He is here to make sure you can rock your first impression. You can see even from his own photo there, his image says nothing but rocking his own impression. Look at that suit, look at everything. I brought you the best to kick off 2018. My name is Jody Brockington, and I will be your host. I've had the honor of hosting this show now for some years and bringing you some of the best, brightest, and subject matter experts on career success and those who can give you tips, advice, and the information you need to make your career as successful as it can be. I've been with the Urban League Jobs Network for a while, and we want to make sure that everyone gets the tools they need to succeed in their job journey, their job search, and also their career journey. Everything starts with something, but you need some information, and we're here to bring it to you today. Torrin Ellis, I had the great honor of getting to know actually through LinkedIn. He's always giving great advice, so I actually suggest you all start following him about what to do with your resume, how to interview properly, and really how to make that first impression happen. So when we decided to do this topic, I said, we need to have you. And he said, of course, I want to make sure that the next generation of our leaders and those who are already leading can lead even better. Torrin Ellis, you might know or seen or heard on Sirius XM. He contributes to them. He was also recently with another Urban League Jobs Network favorite, Ken Johnson, on his Career Seekers show out in Philly, where he showed people how to rip their resume, of which he will share with you today as well. And also, he's able to really help people in the diversity and inclusion space. And those of us who are trying to make a difference where diversity, career, and success kind of meet a trifecta and come together. So today he's going to show us how he's done it, share some good, bad, and some of the ugly of when it can go wrong from some stories, advice, and also give you some tools to leave with to help you rock your first impression. With that further ado, I'd like to bring up our great Torrin Ellis. I'm not sure if you guys are going to be able to see him today. We are actually having a little problem with our webcam, but his voice will still bring you in. So Torrin, thank you so much for joining us today. You can tell them a little bit more about you if they haven't seen our little video clip that we use for the promotion, and then get right into your presentation.
So Jody, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. I want to say good afternoon to you and to all of the individuals that are attending that have found it important enough to take an hour out of their afternoon. Absolutely appreciate you. I appreciate you also for giving me the invitation to be able to kick off the year with the National Urban League in this particular webinar. January, the first month of the year, absolutely the most important month when it comes to setting the pace and the tone for what it is that you do in your professional space. So Jody, thank you. For those that are attending, it's just important for you to know that I've been in recruitment now since 1994. I ran highly successful sales teams for MCI Communications for about 4.5 years. And when I left, I had one of the top sales teams in the entire country. I hired most of the individuals that were on my team, took that experience and aligned myself with a very dear friend of mine, and we started a recruiting company in 1998. And I share that with you as a backdrop because I want you to understand that this is not something that I read in a book. It's not something that I downloaded from the web. This is something that I've lived for almost the last 20 years, having interviewed tens of thousands of individuals, speaking to tens of thousands of individuals around what it takes to put your career footprint in check, in place, to get that fortified so that you can have a compelling conversation. Have talked to hiring managers inside of telecommunications and information technology that need engineers front and back end, talking to people around artificial intelligence and careers of the future. So what we're about to experience over the next 30 minutes or so is real life, trying to give you what it takes for you to make sure that you are properly positioned in this competitive landscape. So I'm not sure if I have the controls at this particular point, but if I don't, we can move it forward and get popping.
Fabulous.
So I know that we did a poll in the beginning, and they were capturing what was most challenging for individuals in their workplace, in their professional pursuit of doing better. And I'm not sure exactly if the poll was actually run. It looks like it's being run right now, but if you are able to click on something, I'd love to hear from you. What's giving you the most challenge? What causes you pause? Is it your brand, who you are? Is it your resume, that document, that piece of paper that you are digitally transmitting to individuals? Or is it actually sitting in front of someone over the face-to-face or over the phone conducting an interview? So if you don't mind, click on one of those three boxes and let us know what causes you the most pause in this particular process. Really what I want to talk about is you. I want to make sure that you understand how you can make a difference. And that was pretty quick. So for a lot of people, it looks like their brand, which is awesome because we're going to start with that. But I want you to talk about, I want you to think about how you can make a difference in this process. And one of the things that I think is extremely important is a formula that I have always operated from. It's P minus I equals R. P stands for potential, minus I, which stands for interference, equals results. P minus I equals R. And I want you to think about that as you are shadowboxing in this conversation today. I want you to think about how you can make a difference. Has nothing to do with the outside factors. Has nothing to do with people who have not responded to your interests via Career Builder or Monster or Indeed.com. Has nothing to do with that failed phone screen that you may have had in the fourth quarter just before the holidays. Nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that you may have been downsized in January. Wow, what a way to start the year. There are people across the country that lost employment in the beginning of the year. I want you to focus for the next 30 minutes and beyond on how you make a difference. So we got three things that we're going to talk about: defining your brand, creating a dynamic resume, and excelling in the interview. And because 40% of you or a bit more feel like defining your brand is important, I'll spend maybe an extra 30 or 45 seconds in that particular category. So much to say, so little time to say it. So let's keep pushing through. So when we look at defining your brand, it really is about a brand building sequence for me. When I talk about brand, I'm talking about how do you start to narrate your story? Who are you? Like, are you a person who brings change to an environment? Can you revolutionize the workplace? Are you a problem solver? I want to be able to see that when I look down at your document. But the only way that I'm going to be able to see that if you are genuinely conveying on that piece of paper who you are. Let me give you an analogy for just a moment. You see, when we approach this process, the mission really is about a space invasion. And what I mean by that is, on your side, it's almost as if you've taken a piece of paper and you've jotted down 9, 12, 16 small little dots, 3 or 4 in each row. And that you are putting your pencil on one of those dots and you are trying to connect them so that you can make a little box. Jody and I used to play that game when we were growing up. And when you would complete a box, then you'd put your initial in that box to show ownership. And then the person you were competing with, they would try to do exactly the same thing. Who can complete the most boxes? So on your side, you're trying to complete boxes. On the employer side, they already have a puzzle in place. There's just a missing piece or two or five. And what's going on is they're trying to see if, when they look at your resume, does it look like the puzzle piece that's going to fit where they need you? And on your side, you're trying to uncover whether or not your resume, your boxes, match the shape of the puzzle piece that's missing. And the challenge is that in this space invasion, it's really a mission of trying to bring the two sides together. You really want me as the recruiter, as the hiring manager, as the person in human resources, you want me to play a bit more of your game. And I want you to be able to play mine. And so if we go into this with an open, let's say an open eye, an open aim, if you will, the goal is to try to bring the two games together so that we both win. That space invasion is extremely important. And so when you think about your brand, I want you to think about how do you present yourself on paper? Who are you? Like, I don't need you throwing down buzzwords because they sound great or because you were able to copy and paste them from a job description, or you had one of your friends' resumes or a cousin or an auntie's resume, and you took that phrase off because it really looked good. It sounds great. And I want to put that on my document because I want to be that person as well. But see, I'm skilled as a resume writer, as an interviewer, as a recruiter. I'm skilled, and I'm really looking through forensically, if you will. And I'm looking for things that just don't seem to be in the right place. And I'm going to try to pick up on that. I'm going to try to find that. It's not because I'm trying to be mean or I want to discount who you are, but I need to make sure that when you send it over to me, I'm really getting the authentic you. I want you. So I want to know about your character, your qualities. I want to definitely know about your skill set. It really is about you putting who you are on that document all the way through that document, from the very beginning down to the bottom. And let me just share one little tip with you that I do. When I see an individual send me a resume, when I see them send me a resume, I always start from the bottom to the top. I start from the bottom reading it because I want to see where a person started. I want to be able to see whether or not their next move makes sense sequentially. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to put a little red check next to that. That's not a bad thing. I'm just trying to make sure I can follow the story. And I'm going to ask you about that if I decide to call you. So from the very beginning, please, 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 I implore you, spend time crafting who you are as an individual. And then more importantly, spend time being that individual. I don't need you to be me. I don't want you to be Miss Jody Brockington. I don't want you to be the person that you saw to the left or the right. I just want you to be who you are. That's your brand. That's what's important. Let's get to that rip the resume piece. You know, this is always fun. Always fun, because a lot of individuals, when they look at resumes, they kind of look at it as one of those things that, once again, I can just kind of go to Google. I can type in resume format. I can find some little Microsoft Word document, take one of those shells with those templates, and I can make that work, and I'll send it over. Seeing it far too often. Not people like you, but even from grown people, tenured individuals that have been doing the work that they've been doing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years or longer. Terrible resumes. Just got off of a call with a university here in Baltimore. We're going to do an event on March 28th. And they said of all of the things that the employers say, all of the complaints, they love going to the campus. They love the students, their ambition. They love everything. The resume is the worst thing. And so I want you to know that even in an age where technology is extremely important, where we have HR technology that's trying to make the resume obsolete, as long as that resume is important and considered a factor, then I want you to make sure you put forth the very best document that you possibly can. And I know that the National Urban League's team, I know that they have a document that you can either download or they will send to you that I gave to them. It is a synopsis of Rip the Resume. Make sure you get a copy of it. But I want you to make sure that you understand that as long as we are asking for people to send in resumes, then you need to make sure you are sending in the very best document that you can send in. And while we are talking about sending something, the first rule for me is that if your resume does not meet 70% of the requirements that a job description is asking for, do not waste your time applying. I'll repeat that. Every single job description has a little brief on the organization, the company. They talk about all of the colorful stuff, the superfluous and the fun stuff, the environment and all of that. And then they give you a list of duties, responsibilities. And that could be anywhere from 7, 10, 15, maybe 20 bullet points long. In many cases, too long. But that's a whole nother conversation. And then they ended with requirements. I want you to treat that as a non-negotiable. This is what they are asking for. And so when you look at that list of items, 10 items, if you don't have at least 7 of them, do not apply. You are wasting your time. And you are wasting mine. And you are making it harder for other individuals that are applying. True story. Very dear friend of mine in Georgia had applied for a role. This is 3 years ago. Really, really wanted this particular position. Sent in his resume. He didn't do the number one thing that I encourage candidates to do, but he sent in his resume online, and then he followed up with a phone call. And the hiring manager told him, I just hired someone. I can't remember if it was the same week or the week before, but what I do remember is that, I quote, the hiring manager said, I just got tired of sifting through resumes and I just pulled the trigger and hired someone. A good someone, but I just had to hire someone. He was just too late. His resume was one of 400 resumes. Many of them were not qualified for the position. He didn't get a fair shot because too many people unqualified were there before him. If your resume doesn't have 70% of what they're asking for, do not send it in. 3 common mistakes. People are omitting details. They're not really sharing with me the depth of what it is that they do in their role. They don't mind putting a bullet point, but I can't really make a decision in terms of your efficacy, whether or not you are efficient, whether or not you are a person who gets results by you just merely giving me a bullet point. People will say, for an example, I lead a team of accountants, or I run a night shift of employees that move things around on the warehouse floor. Well, what I would want to see is how many accountants are on your team and how effective are they? So I lead a team of 12 accountants that generate something in the neighborhood of $5 to $10 million worth of accounts receivables on an annual basis. That's a totally different sentence than I run a team of accountants. I run a team of 4 highly efficient warehouse staff that have experienced 0 accident rate over the last 12 months. That's a totally different statement than I run a team of warehouse folks. I want you to be descriptive, provide me with some details. People don't do that. The other big mistake is that people include an objective. I am not going to spend time on that. Make sure you get the document, but I can tell you right now, if you send me a resume with an objective on it, I'm deleting it. I don't have time to read that, because 9 times out of 10, your objective has 0 to do with the job that you are applying for. So I'm not wasting my time reading anyone's objective. I don't care who you are. You can have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD. If you send me a resume that has an objective at the top, I'm deleting it. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction that most of the recruiters that I know across the world, not just in the US, if you send them a resume with an objective, They're going to look at you sideways. Third mistake that most people make, repetitive information. I've seen far too many people that have been in the same type of position or a similar position, and they'll just simply copy the responsibilities from one and put it up in the next role. There is nothing there that says that you are interested in who you are on paper. So I see too much repetitive information. Last two bullet points real quickly. Adjectives and adverbs are extremely important. And what I mean when I say artistic narration, I want you to go back to those dots that we had in the very first slide. And I want you to be colorful in how you describe the work that you are doing. I want it to be poetry. I want it to be artwork on paper. You might be sitting in your respective place right now, and you're like, Torrin, what in the world? I mean, why? How possibly can a resume be art? Because it can. Because it actually can. You can give me different ranges of eye movement. You can force me to zone in on certain aspects because you use bold letters or underlines, or you change the length of a bullet point entry. You can do that because you have color blocking in the body of the resume. And if you don't know what color blocking is, make sure you email me and I'll tell you. There's things that you can do to make your resume be artistically pleasing, aesthetically pleasing. But I need you to spend time with that document to be able to do that. I share with people that I've been on my own since 1998. And right now, if Jody asked me to send her a resume, I can hit send from my Dropbox. She'll have a document that took me 17 hours to write back in 2000. Now I just make sure that I keep it updated. Let's move it forward. Star candidates interview. I'm going to focus on one piece right here, and that's waylay. And the waylay acronym stands for wage earner, act like an employee, an entrepreneur. Wage earner, act like an entrepreneur. That's the mindset that I need you to have when you are conducting an interview. I want you extremely focused on operating in that business as if you are the person who owns that particular role, that small role that you are responsible for, that you are vying for, that you are trying to secure. That role is the most important role in the business. That's the way that I want you to treat it. And that's a different person. And so when we think about that interview preparation and going back to the 70-30 alignment, or the 7 out of 10 alignment that I mentioned 2 slides ago, you will go to an interview having already done the work, not a candidate looking for work. Make sure you remember that. I never want my candidates looking for a job. When I send them in, when I set them up for an interview, when I provide them with a coaching session, when I leave them with that empowerment that they have already, or they know that it's important for them to do the work prior to going into the interview. I never want them sitting in front of the person with the posture of, I'm looking for a job. People look at that image that's on the Rock Your First Impression site and they said, geez, Torrin, like, you look so mean, can you smile? I'm smiling because I know what I'm up against. I'm smiling because I know what I'm up against. When I walk into a room and into a meeting, I'm absolutely confident that I'm supposed to be there. I know that I've earned the right to have this conversation, whatever that conversation is, to include the one that we are having right now. I need you to operate with that same type of bravado, if you will. That's not arrogance. It's, I know that I've done the work. I've researched the organization. I've looked at press releases. I've looked at competitors and some of the market movement. I've looked at acquisitions and venture funding and what kind of types of capital infusion have gone into the organization. I've looked at how they operate in the community, or their 2020 sustainability report. I know what their nonprofit philanthropic endeavors might look like. And no, I don't have all of this memorized, but I've looked at all of it. And so as I'm sitting inside of the interview and I'm mapping out my conversation, I know that I can pull from different parts of the experience so that I can show the person, paint a picture for the person that I'm the person who's supposed to be fitting that puzzle that you're trying to put together. Remember, when we are across from them, we're trying to bring the space invasion together. We're trying to get them to play our game, to see the boxes that we were filling in, and you're trying to uncover whether or not you are the gem, you are the missing piece of that puzzle. And so I need you to be able to map out that conversation. But mapping that conversation also happens real time. When you are sitting in that office and you're looking around at the awards and the imagery on the walls and the pictures on the desk and the paperwork, whether or not it's scattered, and looking at the carpet and the coloring and the decor and all of that is a signal of who this individual is, and it might be a signal as to how they run their business. So you should be able to factor that into your your conversation. That's how a star candidate interviews. Last but not least, and most important, is that you must trial close. Too many candidates get up and they shake hands and they talk about whatever questions they want to ask. We didn't even talk about that, but they talk about the questions and all that good stuff, and they just say, thank you for allowing me to come out. Thank you for interviewing me. No trial close whatsoever. And so what I'm going to share with you right now, you won't remember it, but I need you to hear it. Jody, thank you so much for sharing with me the mission of the National Urban League. And over the last hour, based on our conversation, you've painted a very rich picture of what the Urban League is trying to accomplish in 2018. You've definitely shown me the value and the responsibilities in this role, and I'm now even more excited about joining your team. What's the next step in the interview process? That is how you trial close. And I will do that 1 million times between now and the end of the year, and I'll never mess that up. I will thank Jody for the time that she's given me, thank her for the information that she shared, reinforce that I'm even more excited about joining the team, and then I will ask, what is the next step in the process? That is how you trial close. And if you don't do that, then you've allowed yourself one deficiency in the interview process, and a competitive person like myself, 1+ in the interview process. You have to do these things if you want to ensure that you have the best shot at moving forward. Real quick, I know that we are nigh on time, but I had to at least throw this in. This is the piece that I want you to think about when you are becoming that star candidate. I want you looking at market research. I really want you spending time. I don't care what space you're in. You can be a government contractor. You can be an intern, someone with a graphic design degree, fresh out of college. You could be a person 2 years removed and you are growing through your career and you're looking for a promotion. You can be a person who never interfaces with the customer. You have no customer facing responsibilities. Everything about your role is behind the veil. You are behind the corporate corridor. No one is going to have contact with you. I still want you to conduct market research. And the more that you conduct market research, the better you will be in terms of shaping your conversation for whatever time it is that you are going for. Whatever it is, whatever role it is that you are going for. Market research. Value proposition is absolutely important. On SiriusXM this past week, we talked about negotiating in light of the boycott request from one of our comedians. We had a conversation with the listeners on how do you set yourself up to be able to negotiate. And one of the things that I shared with them is that you have to have a value proposition. The second step is we need to understand that you have a contribution, that you understand the space, and that you have a high degree of conviction. That helps to shape your value proposition, tied to the very beginning when we talk about your brand. And then last but not least, I need you all to get some strategic mentors. It's unfortunate, but too many of the candidates that I work with, they don't have strategic mentors. They might have a mentor, not a strategic mentor. And what I mean by that is one person who's a level or two above you and one person who is in a department totally different than yours. Repeat. A strategic mentor is a person who is 1 or 2 levels above where you are right now, and someone in the company in a totally different department. We don't have time to go into why that's important, but let's just say you become operationally more of a threat, a positive operational threat, because you are getting fed and nurtured and developed by a variety of people and not just folks that are in your business unit. Moving forward. How can I make a difference? Moving forward real quick, because we don't have a whole lot of time. So I won't spend time there, but recap before we get to the questions. I want you really working to solidify your footprint. If you want more out of 2018, I can assure you that it's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you a little bit of time. It's going to cost you some dedication. You're going to find yourself inside of some rabbit holes digging for information, but it's going to cost you something. But everything that's worth it will cost you something. So I want you working really hard to build a strategic footprint. I want the youngest person, and when I say youngest, the youngest individual watching or listening right now, thinking about what they want life to look like for them professionally 3 years from now. And I want you to be starting to begin working on what that person looks like today. Off the break in 2018, I need you to set some new boundaries. You need to set some new boundaries around your expectations in and out of the workplace. Because if you already know that it's going to cost you something to grow in 2018, then you probably can't approach all of life in or out of the workplace the way that you did in 2017 or 2016. You might have to shift your agenda. You sat down on December 31st and you said, I'm going to put these resolutions in place. Well, that's cool. But now you may say to yourself, I need to shift it a little bit. But I want you to set some new boundaries and some new expectations. And I don't want minor expectations. I want those convicted expectations. I want big dream expectations. I want challenging expectations. That's what you want. And then last but not least, you got to treat every single day like you are an athlete. I have a client. They do not refer to their employees as employees. They refer to them as athletes because they know that the mindset of an athlete is that they are always working on their craft. That perhaps on a Monday, they will focus on their twitch muscle, or they will focus on their agility, or they will focus on their start, or they will focus on their backwards movement, balance. Athletes isolate aspects of who they are because they want to become even better. And so the same holds true for you. If you are extremely serious about this, then you'll look at your document and you'll say to yourself, if Torin spent 17 hours writing his document and he doesn't even need it, then how much time am I willing to spend on mine? Am I willing to really look at this one position and really, really work on it so that it's better than it's ever been on a piece of paper? Am I willing to go into the office tomorrow and really, really learn Excel because I don't know it enough that designates or determines that I should get the next position? So I'm really going to learn Excel. Do I have an incredible greeting on the phone when people are calling in to my place of business, or can I work on the way that I greet people on the phone? You are sitting in all points of this country, and right now you feel my energy coming through because I had to learn to work on that. So I want you to treat all of 2018 like you are an athlete. Every day, every single day. So I'm not sure if now is when we turn it over to Jody, but I'm going to try to do that. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So again, I thank you. Hopefully that is exactly what you expected, Ms. Brockington.
It's more than what I expected. I'm excited. I was so caught up. I'm like, oh, I have to talk again. I hope you and the audience understand why Torin is kicking this off and clearly is the right person to help you rock your first impression. One question that came in for sure, and before we go to those, I do want to reiterate what you said earlier. If you all look to your right-hand panel where the questions and the chat box is, there's a handout box, and it says there's one handout, and that handout is the Rip the Resume handout from Torin Ellis himself. You guys are lucky enough to be listening today and being able to download this, and we will also send it out to those who are unable to join us and did sign up for today's session. So make sure you download it while we're still here today. It's fresh in your mind and might bring up some more questions. But of course, the first question, which I knew was going to come, was for you to kind of expand upon how your P minus I equal R kind of has played out in a positive scenario and when it didn't really work out, where there was too much interference. So when it works to, great results, and where your potential could, maybe didn't work out so well for a client that you worked with or someone applying for a job, but how this equation can really help people frame their own thought process as they go through their own career journey.
Yeah, got it. So I'll give you one quick example. 2011, I'll never forget it. 2011. Hear me clearly. I had already been working, of course, since 1998 on recruitment. I'm known across the country as a person who really unapologetically focuses on diversity and inclusion. Had this particular client in 2011 in Virginia, Northern Virginia, that wanted me to handle diversity recruitment for some of their clients. It's a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to introduce me to Ken Chenault. At the time, he worked for American Express and a couple of other big clients that they had. And so I went and worked on a search for them. Potential has already been proven. Went and worked on a search. And when I did the search, I actually called on someone to do a bit of networking. And I failed to ask an appropriate question in terms of framing the work that I was doing. And what I want you to know is that the person that I spoke with called my client, told my client that I was racist because I was looking for a diverse candidate and not just a general candidate, and that they felt like they were qualified for the position that I was working on, but that they couldn't apply for it because they weren't diverse, they weren't underrepresented. And as a result of that, they were going to lodge a complaint with the EEOC. Immediately, my client took note, sent me an email. We had to have a conference call, and they severed the relationship with me based on the fact that they thought that they were going to file an EEOC complaint. It cost me an $11 million opportunity because they no longer moved forward with American Express and some of the other companies that they represented. They wanted me to build the diversity recruiting practice for them. It cost me $11 million because I lost sight of something that was able to interfere with my moving forward. So I want you to know that when I talk to you, I'm not just throwing it out. As I said in the beginning, I live this, and I treat myself in the work that I do the very same way that I treat it for you. I don't go to a meeting having not done the work. I do the work before I get to the meeting. So P minus I equals R.
So interference can do a lot of damage. So stay focused, know your stuff, and also some of it takes integrity and your own value to stick to what's really important to you. The other thing you brought up, which I thought was really great point, about the 70% of what's on a job requirement needs to be reflected in one's resume, their LinkedIn profile, what they do. And so the question was, so without this 70%, you're saying not to apply because then is this where someone's resume might go to the, what I call the black hole? Like they don't hear from a job because they just don't meet the mark? So that's what they want to know. If you don't reach 70%, does that mean you're not qualified or that you need to spruce up your resume?
Yes, for the individual who asked that question and anyone else that's listening, you got to ask it from the standpoint of, would you hire a person who only had 30 or 40% of what you were asking for? Would you hire an individual to do a role inside of your team, your company, who only had 50% of what you're asking for? 70 is a fair number. And the reason why I do 70, and there's no statistics to support that, so I just want you to know that I haven't done a thesis statement on it. I haven't polled a whole bunch of people. I just know what tends to work. But you have to say to yourself that if I can do most of what you need, then here's how you shape it in the conversation. Jody, listen, I know that I don't have the other 3 things that you're looking for, but what it does is it allows me to get in, be effective immediately, because I know much of what you need. And the other 30% gives me something to shoot for. It's a bit of a challenge. I get to grow into the role. And guess what, Jody? I'm not going to become bored 6 months from now, 12 months from now, because I can already do everything that you're asking for. Most employers are losing talent in the 18 to 24 month mark. And so if you can share with them in an interview, in your conversation, that you can grow into the role, that you're going to be productive in a short period of time and beyond, and that you're going to stay with them beyond that 18 to 24 month window, then they in their mind are thinking about that puzzle, and they're thinking about what it costs to bring a person onto the team. And a lot of you don't know this, but the average cost to bring a person onto a team is somewhere between $7,000 and $12,000. So it makes them feel better about investing that $7,000 to $12,000 because you will be here for a longer period of time versus someone who might come in and leave in 8 months because they got bored. 70-30 rule.
So you're leading me to the other side of this question that also was asked. So someone like yourself, myself, been in the game for a while, and they almost have like 200% of what's asked, and you know, the whole overqualified statement. So the fact that someone, employer might not think you're going to stick around or turn you down because, you know, they're afraid you might ask for so much. How do you, within a resume, not dummy down, because I'm anti-dumbing down how talented you are, but how do you make it less percentage? So you're like, there's the side that is only making it to 70, less than 70%, but those that are making it to 100% plus, how can they still seem marketable and not overqualified? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but there's no way to do that. You are marketable and you are overqualified. But you have to remember the first rule of doing this is pick up the phone. As a star candidate, you never send your resume in advance of you making a phone call. I don't have one client, one coaching session that I've ever told a candidate, go ahead and just apply on CareerBuilder or Indeed or something like that. Now, granted, I understand that you will find opportunities, Jody and others, that you want to apply for. That's cool. Go ahead and apply for them. But the roles where you really want to be involved in the organization, or you really want that, you need to pick up the phone. And in this case, when you know that you're overqualified, I'm going to call Jody and say, Jody, listen, I know I can apply online at CareerBuilder or Indeed, but my preference is that I not have to compete with a whole bunch of individuals and you not necessarily see me because of the influx of documents. Do you have an email address that you're at liberty to share so I can send my document directly to you? Jody's going to say yes or no. If Jody says yes, Jody, you might also see that I bring a wealth of experience to the equation. I only ask that you not allow that to stop you from getting to know who I am and my contribution a bit more. I'm sending my resume directly to Jody, and Jody already knows what to expect when she looks at that powerful document. So there's a reason why I need you picking up the phone and not just hitting send from a keyboard. We want to increase the efficacy and the hit rate, and you will only do that when you have some level of relationship rapport with the person reviewing it. You will never get that relationship with an applicant tracking system or just hitting enter on your keyboard. So pick up the phone, do not dumb down who you are, but be prepared to put a narrative around why you are applying for whatever it is that you are applying for based on what you're bringing to the equation.
Gotcha. No, because I often feel on both sides that companies and organizations have lost out on great people who might also just be making a sector switch. So for them, they might be overqualified to some degree, but there's still a good learning curve, as you were speaking in your first example. And then vice versa, where people just don't apply, kind of like back in the day and even now, for scholarships and other things because they think, oh, there's going to be people smarter or better than me. So that's a great suggestion, to reach out, and not all the time is there a phone number or a way to reach someone, but at least also make that part of your cover letter or something, other communication, if that's the only other way to communicate. The next goes back to the next question. There was quite a few questions on this, but I'm going to try to consolidate some of them. With your trial close, one, you have yours down, so you're expecting folks to kind of have their own way of closing, but, how often should they be practicing? What are the, 3 things that they need to hit in it? And then do you tie that your trial close to your thank you note, like your follow-up after the meeting?
Hey, Jody, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to interview me. I absolutely appreciate your sharing additional insight as it relates to the Urban League. Based on our conversation and the research that I've done, I'm now even more excited about joining your team. Do you have any additional questions for me? I want to make sure that when you are considering my candidacy, that your review is complete. And if you don't have any other questions, then what's the next step in joining your team? As it relates to the thank you note, let me get to that in a second. But for all of those that are listening, you thank the interviewer, you reassure them that you are even more interested in joining the team, you make sure that they are very clear on all of your responses, and then you ask them what's the next step in the interview process. 4 things. Thank the interviewer.
Yeah.
Reassure them that you are more interested now in joining their team. Number 3, make sure that they are clear on who they see you to be. And then number 4, what's the next step in joining your team? When you think about the thank you letter, Jody, what I would do is go to Walgreens or CVS or the local store and get a thank you card, blank thank you card. And I'm going to get that blank thank you card and reinforce, Jody, thanks for spending some time with me. Learn that you were on travel doing a few things this past weekend, and I appreciated that. It adds context to who you are as an individual inside of this interview process. Let me back it up for a moment. I want you to understand that when you send a thank you note, there is a process to it. I don't want your thank you note to be something that is canned. I don't want it to come via email. I want a hard thank you note. I want a card. So thank Jody. Mention something that was exchanged in the interview. One thing that only you would know about because it was your interview. And then let Jody know that you're looking out for, looking to continue in the process. Make sure you send that thank you note. If it's a panel interview, you don't have to send a note to everyone on the panel, but at least the person who leads the panel. And there will be an individual who leads the panel. It may be the person who set the interview up from the very beginning. You can send it to them and ask them to share it with the interview panel. But I want you to send a hard thank you note, tie that thank you note back into the interview experience so that they know that it wasn't canned. And once again, back to that brand, that it was authentic. They really went out of their way to thank me. They didn't go home and hop on email. They didn't sit in the parking lot and pick up their iPhone or their Android. They actually took a moment to get a thank you note for the time that I spent. That is what a star candidate will do. I didn't do this webinar because I wanted you to be an average candidate. I didn't write the book because I wanted you to be an average candidate. Make sense, Jody?
Mm-hmm. And I take it a step further that I do try to, if it's often you guys will find these days that most of your interviews will not be with one person, and there'll be multiple interviews. You'll get that first interview just from an HR recruiter just to make sure you're not crazy and that you are that person that's on that piece of paper they saw. You'll get another interview maybe with the person who you're going to work with or a couple people from that team, and then maybe circle back with someone else. So it's a process. So every person you touch could be important. Even if you don't get that particular job, you might want to still work at that organization, and these people can still become your champions. And maybe you're only 70% for a job that you saw online, but they looked at your resume and you're 100% for a completely another position in another department. So you still always have to be at your best. And I don't go Hallmark, I go Crane's paper myself, Torin, for my thank you notes.
You got it.
And I want to make sure that you do emphasize that those are important and they're not to be sent 3 weeks later. Like, you should already have those cards ready. Not that what you're writing is ready, but that you have them already kind of addressed. You know where they're going, and have a couple of extras, because maybe Torin was going to interview you, but instead I showed up because Torin was pulled out and I'm his equal on another department or on his same team, or the person you might be working with. So always have extras. Same thing when you're going in, have extra copies of your resume. Even though they said 3 people, have 10. Just always be extra prepared. And so the follow through and that close are really important, because what you say in that close will allow you to really make sure that there's nothing else. You know, in 3 weeks you're going to hear from them, and that when you hear from them, you'll have an offer. Or they'll tell you it's going to be 3 more weeks because there's 10 more people in the pipeline. And so that's why you want to get that letter out as soon as possible. So thank you so much, Torin, because I don't think people put enough emphasis on that close. Like, people are usually just happy to get into the interview room and get out. And you want to make sure when you're getting out that you're leaving with the information you need and knowing that you're going to get. For sure, everyone here, Torin, which is why I'm already a stalker, wants to follow you. You guys can all follow him across every social media platform at Torin Ellis. And they wanted to know, even though you are a contributor to SiriusXM, are you on a certain channel? Does your stuff stream on a certain line? Are they certain days? Are there some older ones that they can have some access to?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Jody. SiriusXM channel 126 every single Monday. SiriusXM channel 126, the Karen Hunter Show, every single Monday, typically between the 4 and the 5 o'clock hour. Sometimes I get in and rock a little bit after 5, depending on who's on the agenda. Can I just share one thing, Jody, as it relates to SiriusXM?
Of course.
The reason why I do this, and I like to give thanks and appreciation to people who give me access to a platform, is because for 4 years, four years, I reached out to national syndicated shows because I wanted to, on every Monday, do 3 minutes around career development. Just 3 minutes. 3. And do you understand that the producers of the shows that I reached out to never felt it important enough to talk about career development? Karen Hunter gave me an opportunity in December of 2015. And she said, I'm going to give them 7 minutes. We're going to talk about resumes and whatever. The 7 minutes turned into 15. 15 turned into 30. 30 turned into an hour. The next day, we talked for another hour. Gave her a syllabus for 6 months, and I've been on the radio ever since. That is not to impress you. That is to share with you that career development is extremely important. And we don't just talk about resumes and interviewing. We talk about market movement. We talk about careers. We talk about just all kinds of things that impact the professional space. Love her for understanding that career development, diversity, and disruption are important enough that I have access to millions of listeners every single Monday. So SiriusXM channel 126, Karen Hunter Show. Check it.
Now you have some million plusers in your new network from the National Urban League's Job Network. So I want you to kind of close with this last question. It kind of brings in a few things. You talked about how to reach out and call people. There's some folks that participate in some job chat groups, where people know some jobs are available and not exactly always where to send resumes and what to do. And, the whole idea of cold calling for some potential jobs seems kind of, antiquated, but is there a real success rate in that? Like, so from cold calling to knowing a job's available and maybe knowing the recruiter or knowing someone who works there, and then the chat groups kind of bring you into a space where people know about jobs and you kind of know the people, but are they 100% for you and don't always have all the information? So, in this world of technology, reaching out, access, what is the best route of really getting your resume and yourself in front of someone these days between tech and traditional means?
So one thing that we didn't talk about, for me, I always try to encourage people to use a 60-20-20 job search strategy. 60%,
okay.
60% of your time you are spent networking, going to meetings, meetup groups, inside of networking groups, calling inside of referrals, friends inside of an organization. 20% of your time you are on job boards, and 20% of your time you are on social media. Social media is different from a job board, clearly. 60-20-20. When you say what's the most effective, it is a combination of a variety of moving parts. So you do need to pick up the phone and call a good number of those choice employers that you really want to work with. You may not do phone calls in the very beginning because you're trying to shape your conversation and your level of confidence. And so cold calling may not be your thing. But once you get it, you need to pick up the phone and begin to call. But you also need to apply online and hit that enter button on your keyboard. You need to give your resume to a friend through email, and they can give it to another friend and a contact inside of the organization. You need to be able to interface with recruiters that are on Twitter. I know Twitter and the use of hashtags and is an incredible way of finding talent. Instagram. I know a number of recruiters that recruit technical talent using Instagram. Because you put the right hashtag in that you know a certain programming language or you work for a certain organization. And recruiters, we look for people via hashtag usage. So I want you to employ a varied strategy, if you will, but I need people to not be afraid of the phone. You see, what I know going into this conversation, Jody, is that everyone's comfortable just getting in front of a keyboard and hitting send and doing that for 8 hours a day. And then, sitting back in their chair like, man, I did some work today. I got busy. I applied for jobs for 8 hours. Yes. That's a waste of time.
It's destroying all kinds of relationships.
Absolutely. That's a waste of time. So I don't need you to sit in front of Indeed or Career Builder or a computer for 8 hours applying for a job. I need you to be able to break your day up. Looking for work is work, but you have to be varied about that work. Go back to the analogy around the athlete. There are certain aspects of your game that you need to work on. So if it's cold calling and being able to get your introduction tight, then you work on that. And then you spend some time on websites and other things. So it is a combined effort in terms of how do you go about securing a role. There is no one way. There's necessarily not a right way. There's just 1,000 wrong ways to do it. And I say the same thing as it relates to a resume. There's no right way to do a resume, just 1,000 wrong ways to do it. And the reason why I do what I do is to make sure we keep you closer to the right side and not the wrong side.
And then just those quick 3 common mistakes, just the bullets, because a couple people missed it.
So number 1, they omit valuable information, details. They don't provide details inside of their resume. Number 2, they include an objective at the very top of their document. And I will reinforce, if you send me a document with an objective on it, I'm throwing it away. And then last but not least, they're repetitive. They either copy and paste the similar job from before into the job that they have right now because not much changed, or there's a phrase inside of their document that they feel really good about. Like you hear people talk and they always say right after they're talking because they want you to reassure them that the conversation is moving in the right direction, right? Mm-hmm. They'll say right, right, right. Well, that's a familiar phrase for them. Inside of people's writing and in a document, there are familiar phrases that will be repetitive through the document. I don't want to see that. So you need to make sure that you spend time with your document, not being repetitive, but that you give me a colorful and inviting story.
See? Well, I cannot thank you enough. There's a few more questions that we were unable to get to today, and I just encourage you all to reach out directly to Torrin Ellis on LinkedIn, on Instagram, whatever your social media of choice. You see his tag and his handle is there, Torrin Ellis. Very easy to remember. A lot, 90% was answered. Some of the stuff kind of you should be able to answer for yourself if it wasn't directly answered. But Torrin, I can't thank you enough. We will be, for those of you on the line, we are recording this, so we will replay it, and we will send you who all were with us today. You'll receive an email with a link to it. You can also find it and send your friends to the Urban League Jobs Network YouTube channel to find that. In addition, you know, Torrin will have it on his sites when we send him a copy. And in terms of ordering and downloading Rip the Resume, it's in your handout section before you close out today above the chat on the right-hand side of your screen on your panel. And we also encourage you to rip your resume up a little and then upload it to the Urban League Jobs Network. So that way those recruiters and those looking for diverse candidates through the National Urban League will be able to find you at all different corporations that are our partners and sponsors. And then hopefully, if you take Torrin's advice, you will be joining us either for one of our virtual career fairs or coming to our annual career fair in Columbus, Ohio this August. So all roads of the Digital Career Success Series lead us all to the big career fair in Columbus, Ohio. And I hope that maybe Torrin might be joining us. I'm going to try to, you know, I don't know, beat him down for that. Make sure that he twists his arm to join us. But I really do think that whether or not it's the 3 mistakes you make on your resume or, you know, the 60-20-20, all these numbers, if you know, your brand, the P minus I equals R, if you just do a couple of these things and add them to your routine, you will rock your first impressions. And he will always answer emails, texts, your little questions that you have as you're going through the process. Those of you who are making moves and relocating to different cities, all of these same things apply. So we wish you the best. And Torrin, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to just remind you guys that to stay tuned, February 7th, same 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be celebrating trailblazers throughout the month, Black History Month. And we'll be bringing a trailblazer to you. I cannot yet reveal who it is because we're keeping it secret till we get a little closer. But it will be exciting and it will give you the energy that Torrin brought today to put that in a little bit more pep in your step that, you know, not everything is impossible. It does take time. But those of us that are still out here blazing trails for your career success so that you can be successful. So listen in and stay tuned and watch the Urban League Jobs Network and the Urban League's feed on social media for these great Black trailblazer stories. Everyone that you see there, plus Mark Morial himself, our president and CEO, you'll hear about his story of his success, how he got to be president and CEO, being mayor of New Orleans. I mean, he has a deep story, and you never know what people really went through to get to where they are today. So Torrin, thank you so much for kicking off the 2018 Digital Career Success Series. We look forward to hearing from you again, wishing you the best. I know now you have some additional listeners for your radio show, and good luck next week with your event where you're really dividing up and being innovative in the diversity and inclusion space for recruitment. So please continue to be our advocate and champion.
Absolutely. Thank you again for the platform. I appreciate you.
So without ado, you guys have a great afternoon. We look forward to seeing you February 7th, 12 p.m. noon Eastern Standard Time here at the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.